Hey guys, it's Tom here from Pro Direct Running, back with another video, and today I'm going to be giving you a review of an update to one of my all-time favourite mileage shoes. This is the On Cloudmonster 2. Run the B-roll. Now, first of all, I absolutely loved the original Cloudmonster. It's got a real soft spot in my heart. And for me, it was the first shoe that truly authenticated On as a performance running brand. And I actually think in 2022, I racked up more miles in the original Cloudmonster than any other mileage shoe. For me, the slightly firmer underfoot feel combined with a solid amount of stack height underfoot made it a surprisingly versatile shoe for anything from easy jogs to steady long runs. So with that said, it's always a little bit nerve-wracking when a brand come along with a second iteration to such a popular shoe. So without further ado, let's jump into all of the key stats and updates of the On Cloudmonster 2. So jumping into some numbers, the Cloudmonster 2 comes in at around about 300 grams in a men's sample size, which in my UK 9 translates to about a 20 gram increase in weight over its predecessor. But that increase in weight does also come with an increase in stack height, and the Cloudmonster 2 has 35 millimeters of stack in the heel and 29 millimeters in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. We've got a dual density midsole makeup here with Helion Superfoam combined with CloudTech. Now the Helion Superfoam just provides a slightly softer feeling underfoot, whereas those pods compress nicely at toe off, just to give you a little bit more responsiveness whilst you're running. As was the case with the previous version of the shoe, we've also got a nylon speed board running throughout the length of the shoe, which just adds a little bit of extra rigidity and snappiness to the shoe. We've got a redesigned upper with the Cloudmonster 2, but it still remains very roomy and voluminous, but we have got a fully gusseted tongue. The tongue is very thin, but the updates that we got to the lacing system is definitely an improvement over the predecessor for me personally, and we still got a lovely, healthy, plush heel counter. So lockdown, comfort around the Achilles and ankle area is no problem with the Cloudmonster 2. Flipping the shoe over and taking a look at the outsole, probably one of my favourite updates to the Cloudmonster 2 is the fact that we no longer have that big void in the outsole itself. So I took the Cloudmonster, the original version, on some canal towpaths and buffed out trails, that kind of thing. And having this closed up should just mean that you no longer pick up any miscellaneous items, pebbles, rocks, stones, that sort of thing whilst you're running. Rubber coverage wise, very, very similar configuration, if not identical to what you saw on the previous version of the shoe. I'm trying to figure out if it's a little bit thicker, but to me, there's no perceptible difference in the rubber coverage here. But I found the original Cloudmonster to be incredibly durable. I've got, I think, about 800k on my pair of the original Cloudmonster, so durability shouldn't be much of a concern with the second version of the shoe. Alrighty then, so with all of the stats and numbers out of the way, let's dive into the most important part of any shoe, which is obviously how it feels on the run. I've done a few runs in the Cloudmonster 2 now, mostly easy runs to be honest, but I do feel like it's given me a pretty solid idea of how the shoe fares comparison to its predecessor, but also when compared to other shoes on the market in a similar positioning. So I guess the main question people are going to be asking and wondering is, if you've got the original Cloudmonster, how does the Cloudmonster 2 compare performance-wise to it? And I'll say that the feeling underfoot is definitely very familiar. This is not a drastic update where you put the Cloudmonster 2 on and it suddenly feels like a new experience. It's very reminiscent of the previous version of the shoe, but that's no bad thing in my opinion. There's plenty of people who have put the Cloudmonster towards the top of their list when it comes to daily trainers, reliable daily trainers. And so having just that little bit of extra stack height feels a bit softer underfoot now as well, with the slightly different midsole makeup that we've got going on. So overall, very comparable to the previous version of the shoe, but the subtle updates that we've got here do probably make it feel slightly more enjoyable underfoot for me personally. In terms of comparisons to other shoes on the market from different brands, it's an interesting one to position purely due to the fact that the CloudTech pods underfoot do have quite a unique sensation to them. But interestingly, I would say it's fairly similar to a shoe like the Boston 12 from Adidas, where you've got a stiffening agent here being the nylon speed board, you've got a stiffening agent with the Boston 12 being the energy rods that you've got, and it is a bit firmer but also more than capable of picking up the pace. So if I had to compare it to something else out there, I think Boston 12 underfoot is probably the closest I can think of. Generally in On, I'll go up half a size, so I tend to be a UK 8.5 in most brands, but I do go up half a size with On, so this is a UK 9. I found it to fit true to size for me, although as I alluded to when we were talking about the updates to the shoe and more specifically the upper, this is definitely a pretty voluminous shoe. So I've got a fairly narrow foot, so I find that I do have to crank the laces quite tight to get a secure fit with the Cloudmonster 2. It's no bad thing, it doesn't impact the run or the enjoyment of the shoe in any way, but we've definitely got a fair bit of wiggle room here laterally, but also up and down with the old toe flexion. So if you're worried about feeling cramped in a shoe, you should be absolutely fine with this one. So the runs that I've done in the Cloudmonster 2 so far have predominantly been easy runs, recovery runs. However, I've picked up the pace a little bit towards the end of some of them, so they've been slightly progressive. And I do maintain that I think the Cloudmonster is a very versatile shoe. Like with the speedboard in there, with the compressive properties of the CloudTech pods, it does feel pretty nice when you're up on the forefoot, pushing the pace more towards your steady pace, marathon pace, that kind of effort. So it's a firmer feel underfoot. If you love super soft, buttery, squishy shoes, then maybe the Cloudmonster isn't for you. But if you like feeling connected to the ground a bit more, if you like a more responsive and slightly firmer feel underfoot, then this is definitely right at the top of that category for me. Durability wise, obviously I've not got loads and loads of miles in the Cloudmonster 2, but I think as I mentioned earlier, I've got a significant amount of mileage on the original version of the shoe, and I found it to hold up really well. I had a little bit of wear in the forefoot section on the rubber here, but never got down to the foam, never had any issues as a result of durability. So I think if you're looking for a shoe that's going to last 600, 700, 800k and be enjoyable to the very end of that, I reckon the Cloudmonster 2 is a safe bet there. The only other thing to mention is the fact that along with the Cloudmonster 2, we've also now got the addition of the Cloudmonster Hyper. I've only done one run in that shoe so far, so I didn't think it would be fair to do a full review or a bona fide comparison between the Cloudmonster 2 and the Cloudmonster Hyper. But for me, I still definitely think that the Cloudmonster's got a place in the lineup. I wouldn't necessarily consider the Hyper to be a replacement for the Cloudmonster. The main differences really are the fact that in the Hyper we've got a forefoot section of Pebax foam, the Helion HF super foam, which is the same stuff that you find in the Cloudboom Echo 3. On the first run that I did in the Hyper, it did feel a little bit more responsive. It's a bit lighter than the Cloudmonster 2, a bit more stack height, but for me, it doesn't replace the Cloudmonster 2. I think it's more just a preference and using different shoes for different use cases. So the Hyper might be more suited towards out and out tempo days or progression runs or long runs where you are going to be picking up the pace. The Hyper is also without a plate in comparison to the Cloudmonster 2, which obviously has that nylon speedboard. So perhaps your preference would be to train in a shoe that doesn't have a plate in it. Although I will say the plate that you've got in the Cloudmonster 2 isn't that present whilst running. It doesn't feel like you're running in a super shoe or a super trainer as it might do in another shoe from a different brand. So that's going to do it for our review of the On Cloudmonster 2. It's a shoe that I've enjoyed running in so far, just like I did with the predecessor, and it will firmly remain in my weekly running shoe rotation. If you want to get your feet in a pair, you can do so right now at Pro Direct Running. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and turn your notifications on so you never miss a future running shoe upload, and I'll see you in the next one.